watching you, Sammy. Is that okay? I will now call the October 8th, 2024 City Council meeting to order at 6:01. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sammy, would you do roll call, please?
I will. So we have Mayor Bell,
Here.
Counselor Bowman,
Here.
Counselor Engelbretson,
Here.
Counselor Fox,
Here.
Counselor Lehman,
Here.
Counselor Smith,
Here.
Counselor Wells.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. Under mayor comments is our next agenda item. I'd like to, first of all, welcome our new rare fellow. And you've probably seen him around. Hello. We're pleased to introduce you tonight to our newest member. And his name is Dipit Nito Wenzel. Did I get it right?
Yes.
Oh, yay. RARE stands for Resource Assistance for Rural Environments, and is a program out of AmeriCorps, which you probably all have heard of. And it's administered by U of O's Institute for Policy Research and Engagement. This is the first year RARE is partnering with DEQ to implement water quality mandates, something near and dear to our hearts. Certainly, we want that best water we can have. The city of Coburg successfully applied for the unique opportunity to have a RARE member funded by DEQ to complete water quality work and to work in partnership with the Muddy Creek Irrigation Project, as well as the city of Tangent. Dipit will serve our communities over the next 10 months and will manage projects involving public outreach and education, vegetation management, mapping, and stormwater system enhancements. Thank you for joining our team. We're happy to have you here. And as you recall, or may not recall, or some of you may not know, Megan Winner, who is with us now, started out as a RARE fellow, elected after that opportunity, and we were fortunate enough to be able to hire her full time. So RARE is a wonderful opportunity for all of us. I do also want to let you know about a few departures from our team. And two of them are in public works. So between now and the end of October, Burke Hansen will be leaving, and he is going back to his hometown in Idaho. Burke has been a great asset to us for the last 6.5 years. I can't believe it's been that long. And Ty Wilson is also exploring some other options for employment. And he and Burke actually started at the same day. They've both been here 6.5 years. Jeremiah Roop is leaving to join the Eugene Police Department. Is that correct? And Jeremiah has been here 2 years. So while we're sad to see them go, we always celebrate that they had opportunities here to grow and then pursue other opportunities. Can I also introduce a special guest for us, Mr. Myers? I believe I got that right. Yes. And Mr. Myers will be, his name is on the ballot for city council member this in just less than a month, isn't it? Yeah. So we assume you will be joining our ranks, and we're happy that you're here tonight. Thank you for coming. Sammy, agenda review.
Yeah, you guys both have a couple handouts there. I didn't bring out the red folders, but one of them is the city administration monthly report that will fall underneath tab 5. And the second one is the police department quarterly report, and that is under tab 6.
Thank you very much. We have anyone signed up for public comment tonight? Yeah. Okay, thank you. We do have consent agenda items. Counselors, remember that you may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion by requesting such action prior to consideration. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? Being none, I'm going to move on. So I'll entertain a motion at this time to approve the consent agenda, and there were no amendments to be made. I don't hear any. I will go ahead and consider that motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Counselor Bowman. There's a motion by Counselor Bowman, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Counselor Wells. All those in favor can say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to assume there are no opposed because you all said aye, so the consent agenda motion passed 6-0. I think I counted correctly this time. I was trying to do my numbers. I was doing modern math apparently last meeting. Okay, the first item on the agenda, or the next item on the agenda under ordinances, resolutions, and contracts is a public hearing, and this is the first reading of the public hearing. I will now open the public hearing at 6:07. And hold the first reading of ordinance A 100D, an ordinance granting an electric utility franchise and general utility easement to Pacific Corp, repealing ordinance A-100-C and providing for an effective date. We have a staff report from Mr. Hanks.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yeah, as the Mayor said, we have two franchises in front of us this evening, and we did talk about that in prior meetings that we have a whole host of these to get through. This one is a electric utility franchise that is technically expired. There are provisions in the franchise that allow it to continue on a month-to-month while you work on a replacement franchise. So it's not super uncommon that the succeeding or the next franchise agreement occurs after the expiration of the prior. Been in contact with the regional business manager for Pacific Power for the past 6 months. The ordinance in front of you is not significantly changed from the prior franchise. It was reviewed by their legal team and as well as our legal staff at LCOG, really looking at, is there any particular best practice or new industry changes that we needed to be aware of in kind of the standard operations of a franchise agreement. And there really were no proposed changes. We did at kind of my I threw out there a reduction in the term from 10 years to 7. I think with changes in electric industry, I thought that was smart for us to maybe shorten the term a bit. It may or may not matter much in the big scheme, but I think a shorter term just gives an opportunity at a little bit earlier time to revisit that. The basic terms remain unchanged. It's 7.5% of gross revenue for electrical sales within the city limits of Coburg. Yeah, we do have two, as you all are probably aware, Pacific Power and EPUD both operate inside our city. So Pacific Power isn't the exclusive utility in Coburg, which is a little different than is typical. Not much else. We cleaned up or added a little language about some of the auditing requirements of when they submit their payments, that we'd also want to get reporting of kind of current and new customers as that comes on. Pretty typical reporting language to ensure that we have at least the ability to review what they are submitting to make sure that we have the same customer counts. I've been involved in other jurisdictions where it is occasionally bookkeeping errors. Some go back decades that we're able to find to say, well, that was actually not calculated in. It was a customer that's inside the city and there's some revenue there. So the goal is just to ensure that what they're submitting for revenues are accurate to accounts within the city limits. And then we added a little bit of language on trees in the right of way and notification, and just with the objective of having coordination, communication, collaboration when we have trees that impact their utilities, that we get notified prior. Typically, it's a good thing. It clears trees from the area of where otherwise either a single residence or neighborhoods could lose power if trees impact those lines. So typically, it's all good. There are occasions when it may need some discussion. So we wanted to ensure that we have at least the language to point to for communication on that topic. That's probably all I can think of as background. We could get into kind of franchises in general, but these are, this is one of, I think, 8 franchises the city of Coburg has. And then we have another one on the docket here to talk about it for the next public hearing. But that's all I've got as starter kit for you, and I can gladly answer any questions.
Does council have any questions for Adam? Councilor Lehman.
The $279,300, which fund does that go into?
General fund. All franchises revenues go into the general fund. Yes, and that's the total. That's not the Pacific Power franchise total. That's total franchise revenues estimated.
Councilor Fox.
And the fee is set by the government of what can be charged at 7.5%.
No, not necessarily. Yes, sort of. The PUC, can hear that, so the utility could appeal that, and there has been some jurisdictions that have pushed the limits of what is, deemed reasonable by the utilities. This one, I've seen probably most typical for electric utilities is 5%. So this one is a little, I was pleasantly surprised when I was reviewing this franchise at 7.5. The range, from 3 to 7, 3 to 8 is probably pretty typical. So the local jurisdictions can set that, but it can on it's a little bit different between an investor-owned utility and a public like EPUD. They're not regulated by the PUC, but an investor-owned utility like Pacific Power is regulated by the PUC, and there is some governance there that could occur. But I would imagine if we had proposed changing that to a 10%, we would have heard from Pacific Power's legal staff about it. You're really looking for a nexus. You charging a franchise fee for the utilization of the city's right of way and for impacts to those rights of way. It starts getting harder to have a real valid nexus argument when you get up into the double digits of a fee. And as with all franchises, those are passed along. Those expenses of the utility end up, living inside of their rate structures as well. So, all customers of every utility that's a cost embedded in the rate structure. So they effectively pay for that. So there's a incentive really from a city to kind of capture what needs to be captured and has a smart nexus for the impacts. But exceeding that by too far is really, you are impacting, our own customers, our own residents and businesses, because they're paying those.
Good to hear we're at the high end of the bell curve.
Yeah,
I guess that was said a while ago.
yeah, that was, I don't know the origins of that. Liked the number, so I didn't look for the origins.
Are there any other questions?
Just,
Oh, Counselor Bowman.
just, to address, Councillor Fox's point, I read this agreement and it struck me as perfectly almost pro forma and very, very reasonable. So I would not imagine that the 7.5% would cause much of an issue with the PUC. Any higher than that, probably so. But I think if we keep it where it is, I think we're okay. Because this struck me as almost just something ministerial that needed to be signed off on, nothing too controversial.
Yes, I would concur with that. And Civic Corps legal staff, I think, felt similarly as well. So it was a very straightforward, I wouldn't even call it negotiation. There are instances where franchise agreements are highly contentious negotiations. The city of Eugene is an example of that with Northwest Natural. That's a multi-year contentious franchise negotiation.
Anything else? Do we have any written materials submitted?
We have no written or people signed up to speak.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further testimony, I will close the public meeting at, let's see, 6:17. Is there any further discussion from City Council? Then I would entertain a motion to move this public hearing from the first reading to the second reading, and that would be on November 12th.
I move ordinance, the second reading, to the second reading, ordinance A 100D onto the second reading on November 12th, 2024, as presented.
You. We have a motion by Counselor Engelbretson and a second by Counselor Fox to move ordinance A 100-D onto a second reading on November 12th, 2024, as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. The outcome is passed. The motion passes 6-0. We also have a public hearing, which I will open at 6:18. And this is for ordinance A 230-A, an ordinance granting a franchise to use rights of way within the city of Coburg to Astound Broadband. That is the name of the company, Astound LLC, repealing ordinance A 230 and setting an effective date. I will open this public hearing at 6:19 and hold the first reading of ordinance A 230-A, an ordinance granting a franchise to use rights of way within the city of Coburg to Astound Broadband LLC, repealing ordinance A 230 and setting an effective date. I have a staff report again from Mr. Hanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, continuing on with some of the franchise business. As the Mayor mentioned, this is Astound Broadband. And this one is a little bit different than the Pacific Corps in that it is, the rate is a fixed rate because it is a seemingly a very limited utilization of the city's rights of way. There's a provision, it's a flat 400 currently, a flat $400. Our understanding, at least as we were able to dig back through, is that there is a single fiber line that connects their network to antennas that runs through the city limits. Most of their network and their systems are not in the city limits, so it crosses, which then necessitates a franchise for the council to grant that use of the right of way to this company, and that's why you notice that it's $400. I think that was, again, kind of getting back to Councilor Fox's question, kind of the nexus question, really having a fee that that corresponds with the utilization of the right of way, and it's very limited. So the proposed change to this left it at a 10-year, had an increase from 400 to 600, and added a provision for a 3% increase annually, and retained a provision that was in the original franchise agreement to have a more traditional 5% gross revenue franchise fee if the company chose to utilize their existing networks to actually serve retail customers in the city of Coburg and become kind of more of a traditional franchise at that point. In this case, it is really kind of on the backside of their network operations. So it is, I'm trying to think if there's any other, it's a 10-year term. Those were really the only changes. So again, this was reviewed by our LCOG legal staff. There was nearly no conversation with this company, the corporate LLC, which is another name I can't recall right now. It's based out of New Jersey. Sent us a letter, I think, and saying, hey, it's, the franchise is up, so let's renew it, and we just need it renewed. So it's very much, as Councilor Bowman noted in the prior one, this is very much a ministerial house cleaning kind of course of business agreement renewal.
Thank you. Any questions from staff or for staff?
Curious, where do they use the city's right of way? Just geographically.
Yeah, bottom loop, kind of near that intersection. I think it kind of cuts diagonally. We're not exactly. I was trying to look for if the original had an exact map of where that infrastructure is, and we weren't able to dig that out. So we're not altogether positive, but I think in piecing it together, it's that location we're fairly certain, and also that it's underground utility. It's not
within our right of way.
Correct. Yep. It's we just had that discussion. Actually, it's within the city limits, but that portion of right of way is actually maintained by the county. So it's not our right of way, but it is in our city limits, which is another quirk. And I think there is some debate probably between city and county about how far down bottom loop is the cities. So unless we had actual GPS coordinates, we may not know the exact answer to that question, but it is under our overarching regulatory jurisdiction.
No easement, though. I mean, no.
Well, because it's in the right of way, that is in lieu of an easement, that it's a utilization of right of way, and this grants that and kind of designates the right of way as an easement for them for their use.
Any other questions? Council. Are there any written materials, or has anyone signed up to speak?
No.
There's no further testimony. I will close this reading at 6:24 and entertain a motion to move this on for a second reading.
I move to move ordinance A 230A onto the second reading on November 12th, 2024 as presented.
And I will second that.
Thank you very much. We have a motion by Counselor Smith and a second by Counselor Bowman to move ordinance A 230-A onto a second reading on November 12th, 2024 as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hearing no opposed, the motion passes 6-0. Okay, well, those are interesting. That second one, especially, I've never heard of Astound. I was astounded.
No, I had to Google.
Sorry.
I had to Google.
Oh, you Googled it? And what did you find? Anything interesting?
They're just, as I understand it, they are a collection of subsidiaries, and one, Astound is one part of
Okay.
this giant conglomerate sort of thing.
Which is sort of what you were saying,
Yep.
Mr. Hanks, that it was sort of a subset of something else. Okay, any council action items? I think that was it. Right. Okay, so we'll move on. We have the administrative monthly report. And Mr. Hanks, do you want to go over that for us? or-
Sure, I can hit a couple highlights at least, since it's, you didn't have a chance to look at it prior, since it's hot off the press. First item is an update. Mayor Bell already mentioned some departures that we have from the city, and two of which are in Public Works. So, yeah, as I'm sure you're all aware from our budget and other conversations, we have 6 full-time equivalent positions in Public Works. So losing 2 is, yeah, it's a pretty easy math to figure out that it's a big hit. But we are looking at different options to allocate our resources. We're going to hold off on immediate hiring, looking at how we can best utilize the existing funds and appropriations we have to meet our existing workloads and regulatory requirements and equal or better service levels than we have now. And both Burke and Ty, are key members of that team. They're going to be missed. It's always a bummer to have people leave, but as the mayor mentioned, both of them have great professional opportunities in front of them, and both have indicated, but not for their time here working for the city, those opportunities may not be there for the certifications they have, the experience that they've gained both in the field, and the wastewater plant has a lab. There are some very technical aspects to operating our Public Works department, and Brian leads that team really well and did a great job of spreading the wealth in terms of training and growth opportunities. So it is a bummer to see him leave, but it's not unexpected that quality people find other employment that suits their personal needs. So wishing them well, and they're taking off this month, staggered a little bit, and it is interesting. They came on within the same week and are leaving almost within the same week. That was a little quirk, but as I mentioned in here, we're going to evaluate our existing operations, the organizational structure, and how we allocate our resources, and see it's an opportunity to look at potential for third-party contracting certain tasks. There may be some potential. I've been reaching out to other city managers, just exploring IGAs, intergovernmental agreements, other means. We may circle back around saying hiring positions are our best bet, but we're taking that time to truly see what else is out there that may serve us well as we currently sit and as we think we may look and need to function in the future.
It is hard, and having spoken with, well, I have not spoken with Ty directly, but speaking with Bert, I mean, he said, quote unquote, the opportunity is bittersweet. This is going home to the community that he grew up in, back with his family, and into a position that we simply don't offer here. And I think he's going just into wastewater, as I recall.
Yeah, he's, enabling the further utilization of his certifications. So it's a great thing.
So he was very sorry that he wasn't going to be able to see particularly Pavilion Park all the way through, because I think he's had a real investment in that, but this was simply an opportunity that he could not pass up. But it is bittersweet. It's bittersweet for all of us involved, for sure. And we'll miss him. We'll miss all of them. Counselor Bowman.
For my part, I would just like to thank not only Bert and Ty, but the entire public works staff for the work that they do. They are a small team in numbers, but they punch far above their weight. I would particularly like to thank Director Harmon, who's here with us, and in particular, Dax, who I've become good friends with. He is always up for a chat, and he's very, very friendly and very kind, and always very approachable and very honest with me about what they need and things they like to see. And so I'd really like to thank the entire department for the work that they do and the fact that they punch far above their weight, because there is no way 6 people should be this efficient at their job, but yet they are.
Thank you. And I would certainly second that, and I think you would hear that from every member of council. We have been very, very fortunate, but it does, as Mr. Hank said, it gives us an opportunity, and luckily it's kind of coming into that quieter time of year a bit for Public Works. Not that there's ever a real quiet time, but at least we aren't going to be mowing and trying to keep everything green, hopefully, here in the near future. So it does give us that opportunity to sort of reevaluate and figure out, are there some collaborations that will serve us well in the future? So, yes, thank you. Okay.
Next item was a quick, as you mentioned, Pavilion Park, quick update. Thank you again for the special meeting to get that contract, that modified contract approved and underway. We took advantage of that and had the pre-construction already and have mapped out a plan for that. So you'll see work out there starting next week. It might be locates and those kind of things that don't look super impressive right away, but they'll quickly then turn to earth moving and the parking and the concrete and all of that. So our staff will kind of facilitate that. The restrooms will be closed while there's active work, probably right up into Thanksgiving. And then there'll be a pause. Everything will be, for the most part, the contract work will be mostly complete with the exception of the plantings. The plantings then happen in the spring. So that window opens up in, is it late March or early April? Early April, I believe. And so we'll be back in there probably in March. And then the plantings will happen in April, and then kind of all the cleanup punch list kind of things in May. And have it for all intents and purposes by the target is Memorial Day to not see any orange unless it's something blooming, not orange fencing or orange barricades in there. It will not look like it's under construction, but there probably will be, as we talked about last meeting, a few amenities and odds and ends that will be beyond Memorial Day, but it will be fully functional and usable for the community by then.
There has been a lot going on in terms of projects. I mean, the Willamette Macy project is winding down. I just walked up that way today and it looked like they were putting finishing touches, but I won't go into that. But there's been a lot going on.
Yeah, they are. We got that in the Public Works Operations Building, and we will, whether we have a C of O in hand or not, we will do a pre-council meeting for November, having you all out there if you can make it to look at it before next month's council meeting. We likely will have a C of O by then and be in the process of shuffling what's going to live and what what area. That one has slowed down, but you know, it's always excruciating, those final touches. You know, the framework came up really quick and it looked really awesome. And then there's this tedious part of all the finish work. We have a lot of network equipment that are going in next week. And so it's making its way through. So yeah, and then Willamette should be done in a week or so. And then we'll work on our reimbursement paperwork for that to get the partial 250,000 reimbursement through ODOT on that one. So yes, a lot going on. And then we just shift and move right into Pavilion and some other projects. And I'll hit a couple others that are on the project table later. A couple quick hitters. As you all probably have seen, the Coburg Countryman, Coburg Main Street's newsletter, first issue hit the I guess it hit the website. I'm not sure the printing component is still. I don't know, Claire, maybe Councillor Smith may be a little more up to speed on the timing of the printed version. It's imminent any day now. It's soon, yeah. But the electronic version is out and available, and I think as that continues to evolve, I think it'll become a little more formalized and regular. And I think you know, getting that in everybody's hands will be a lot easier as we move forward. But it's exciting. I think Megan Dompe did a great job with that.
I've already heard some positive feedback from a couple of people that have looked at it online, and I think people are very appreciative of communication and that transparency of communication that comes out of the city and from all of you. And I've heard very good things coming back, so good work.
Yeah, it's great to have that available to everyone. So a couple external funding updates. That's the bummer news of the evening. We within 3 days of each other, we got news that we did not get the solar grant for the wastewater treatment plant that we had hoped for. Talking with the ODO, Oregon Department of Energy staff, we got the breakdown of where we scored well, where we didn't score as well as others. And it was somewhat predictable, the areas that we didn't score as well. Our project did not have a large resiliency component to it. It had some, but not as large as many other projects. And kind of the community aspect and who it serves, our project was a little more operational. The community it serves is a little indirect in terms of cost savings, you know, on utilities, not like a community center or an evacuation site. You know, the grants were geared, at least had some scoring components for those things that we just didn't have. We just don't have in our project. It was very competitive, as you see from the notes. 47 million requested, 18 million was available in that round. So as is common with grants, many more interested projects and entities than there is funding. So another round is coming, and we'll tidy up our application, and I think we'll be in even better shape. I'd stay optimistic that's not a dead opportunity for us.
Hey, I applaud the concept. It's, you know, it's unfortunate. Are you able to look at the winning proposals?
I probably could look at the scoring breakdown of the winning. The website does have who got them and what they were, kind of a narrative of them. I didn't see the scoring of them. They were all really awesome projects. Really, really good stuff. A lot of them have to do with, say, evacuation centers, emergency, community gathering places. Several tribes had some really strong, multifaceted projects. And as I said, some of them were really focused as much on battery and resiliency and microgrid as they were on solar. And of the total money, some of it was required to be split out into planning grants and construction grants. So we were in the construction category. So of the total of 18 million, I think it wasn't quite 50-50, but probably 11 or 12 million was construction. So the other 6 or so was for planning grants, and we didn't apply for that. We just applied for actually doing a project. And I foresee us doing that again. I don't think the project is pretty prescribed. It doesn't need a whole lot of unique planning to it. A lot of the planning projects are kind of master planning for multi-phased microgrid development with many partners. And that's another one that scored well. Tribes also had some other nonprofit partners, and I think that always in that social equity and diversity categories helps out projects. But the other one was a little, we discussed it, but I'm not sure how much. I kind of let it sit there, hoping that if we don't talk about it, maybe it'll help, but it didn't. Congressionally directed spending, which is a very unique funding process, used to be called earmarks, federal earmarks. That's through our, we went through our senators, U.S. senators, and made it, got it qualified, got it sent in, just didn't ultimately get it funded. A lot of these are, you have to prove that you're eligible, if the project is eligible for one of 7 or 8 programs, which we were. But once it clears that hurdle, then it really is super discretionary to the senators, as they tell the story to the rest of those committees that make those decisions, and stories, compelling stories and linkages to different events and different issues in each state kind of carry a lot of weight. So it's not, it's very opposite of the solar grant in that it didn't have clean categories and scoring, and you don't get a 3.2 on this category. You just don't know. You just either you get it or you don't. So that doesn't come around as often. But as I noted in here, it's Pioneer Valley Estates is definitely a project that we need to develop a strategy for. That was a commitment that we all collaboratively made, and this was a great opportunity. But obviously there are other opportunities out there, and we'll continue. The part that I really liked about this particular funding chase was that we had great support from the residents at PVE. Chief Minter at Coburg Fire District submitted a letter for us, as did Lane County Public Works, Dan Hurley, the director, which planted the seeds for, as we've talked about, they need to do a paving overlay over there, and we've asked them to wait until we figure out our water. So I think that's, if nothing else, it's really helped us kind of coordinate between the two agencies, and that, I think that's the opening we'll continue to pursue is a combination between us and Lane County on how we figure out a funding strategy that works.
Have we notified PVE of the unsuccessful bid?
Yes, well, their unofficial representative, Larry, yes, I did let him know.
Is this one we can reapply for again and take it, or?
Yeah, the cycle is, I don't know about, we'll have to guess at how we tweak it, because it is kind of a guessing game, but yeah, we can make the story strengthen it. It doesn't come every year. So the cycle is a little bit longer. So it may not be, may not match our time frame of where we think we need to get that funding in place. But regardless of this project, I think that the congressionally directed spending, that opportunity we should always be ready to be active in, because it's so unpredictable and so wide open. There's not many funding sources that are primarily grant and low to no match, and really don't have any sideboards. They can almost, once you get them through that eligible program element, which isn't too challenging, then you're in the game. So I think it's worth always looking at that, regardless of its PVE or a different type of project.
Sounds like it's fairly subjective once it gets beyond us.
Yeah, it's categorically objective, right? So you have to meet this eligibility by category and program, but once you're past that hurdle, then it does get somewhat subjective, and it's really hard to know what you're competing against, because it's national, and it's so you just don't know. So I just kind of set it aside and pretended it didn't exist, and just hoping we'd get great news, but no such luck this time.
was a bummer.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but we'll keep at it. Loop path number 4, we haven't talked about this one a whole lot. This has kind of been, ever since I got here, it was kind of in the design phase and kind of the slow roll design phase. It's a state and federally primarily funded. I think when I got here, we did have to up the match a little bit. I think in fall, we asked and council granted approval to, with the project cost and grant funding, additional grant funding coming along to add to the project. That also meant that our 10.7 roughly percent match would go up a little bit. So we got authorization to spend a little more when that comes due, to maintain the match. The project was stalled out a little bit because of some easements that were necessary. And we were having some challenges in obtaining those easements, some small easements along the frontage of the property. Resolving that by slightly redesigning the project to not need those easements. I think the city of Eugene is the project manager. They're a certified agency. We can't manage it due to the category of federal funds. It has to be a certified agency, and we're not a certified agency. So the city of Eugene is doing that for us, and they're great. And redesigned it without, I think, without a real noticeable degradation in the project. And the project is twofold. It's an extension of the loop path from coming off of the Sarah Lane, headed north to Trails End Park. So it's a large multi-use sidewalk. And a paving project on North Industrial, which is an important piece too for us. They were 2 distinct projects, and then they were merged together in the funding source. So they're now linked. So if we didn't get the loop path, we wouldn't get the paving. So it was important to really creatively figure out how to keep the project going. And I, thanks to City of Eugene staff, engineering staff, got that. Seems like we're back on track to have the design done in spring, and they would be bidding that out on our behalf late spring, early summer for the next year's construction season.
Will you bring us a proposal of what that new project will look like when
Yep.
you have it?
Absolutely. Probably my guess would be either February or March. We'd have that in hand to present to council, because then we'll also then know really clearly what our match amount would be. Because I think one of the benefits too is it, I think, is going to be flattening of the cost. But no promises with today's market, but who knows? Yeah. But that's glad that it's kind of unstuck is really the overriding message there. The last item is we tried and did a little pop-up meeting. The mayor and several of us on staff had a meeting with the Coburg Creek neighborhood. Several of them have been very interested in talking and have been talking with myself, with Brian about, hey, now that there's build out there, now that the majority of the lots are either done or, and three new ones have foundations. I think there may only be one site that actually maybe none. I think they all at least have footings now. So we're right on track to have probably all the construction done in the next 6-8 months, probably at the most, which means that'll be a full build out and have residences there. So it was a great meeting. We had a great turnout. We just, the idea was just to meet out there and kind of twofold. The discussion about the future park was primary, and I think that's what generated the most interest. But it was really great to talk about just anything and everything relating to the subdivision, how it's interacting, how it's actually functioning. Ryan got tugged on a couple little side field trips to some areas of the subdivision, and it was great. So we could look at it and problem solve and figure some things out with the residents. And I think it's just a good format. I think we enjoyed it as staff, and it was great to have the mayor there as well. And we answered a bunch of questions. Really, the messaging for the park is, those were donated lands to the city. We're really not even at the start of the race yet in terms of developing the park. You know, the build out isn't complete yet. It's nearing completion. So I think as we get into spring, we'll be working with Park and Tree Committee to kind of lay out a public engagement, public input plan. And I think part of the messaging was to ensure that the community knew that they get input, but so does the entire community. It's an asset to the entire park system. It isn't only a subdivision amenity, it's a city amenity. And along with that comes challenges in city funding, as we talked about at the last meeting with Pavilion Park. So preaching patience, phasing, and creativity as we start talking, like I say, in spring, more on formalizing some public engagement.
Gotten more comfortable with the phasing process over this last couple of years with escalating costs and certainly at least flattened revenue. I think we've learned that has to be the way we do it. Councilor Lehman.
What's the approximate size of that park, and do we have water and electricity to it?
It is about 30,000 square feet plus or minus, and no, I know no on the electric, and I'm pretty sure no on the water yet. It does have its own service? Okay, great. We do have a water service in there.
Oh, this is again, a little bit of a curiosity question. I'm trying to picture where within that subdivision that parcel is. Is it a single parcel? Kind of like
Yeah, it's actually, it's platted as two different parcels. So phase one of the subdivision, when it was platted, one parcel was required to be dedicated and deeded over to the city. And then at phase two, the parcel right next to it was. So it is, if you come in that multi-use path, the concrete path that you enter off of Skinner, that's the lot immediately to your kind of northwest.
Yeah, it
So
runs-
a little bit
runs
to your left.
east-west,
It's
but
the,
it
yeah.
terminates
Yeah.
on the north side of the division.
It's the only, it's really right now, it's really easy to identify now because it's the only land that does not have a footing or a house on it. Yeah, early on, you couldn't really tell if it was more housing or not, but. And it's mowed right now. It is flat-ish. There is some concern, that some of the, points raised where kids are playing on it now. It's not, it's not a park. It's not in a condition. It's great for, digging and playing with certain things, but it's not it leaves a little to be desired as a active like ball field. It's not any sort of a ball field for that, but it's, usable, walkable, space at this point. And there's interest in short term having the city graded, maybe seeded. And of course, my typical role is the Debbie Downer who says, well, even grading and seeding and irrigating is expensive. And should we be doing that if we are going to then in a year after that rip it up and develop it and spend 100,000 and then rip up that 100,000 and do something different. So that's really part of that phasing conversation is, yes, everybody sees the value in, going in immediately doing something to it, but is that the best use of very limited funds, or do we take a different, unfortunate it's easier for me to say and us to say here than the residents who are right there next to it to say, take the patient approach. But that will obviously come back to council. We'll get some input and we'll have a better feel when we're budgeting for capital the next few years, when we do that this spring. What we can do and what we should do and take direction from you all ultimately about how we map that out.
Councilor Smith.
Just a comment on that, when you mentioned that, kids are over there and playing in it, I think that sometimes we look at formal parks as what everybody wants. It might be nice to kind of look at how those kids are using that park and what they like to do there, and maybe that can drive part of the design.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
We have parks that are natural spaces where kids have lots of opportunity for imagination and to make it their own. Sometimes good ideas come out of that.
Yeah, it's a great point. We talked a little bit about the, kind of philosophically having them kind of get a mindset of, what are the design elements, attributes that they're interested in? What's the difference between a community park and a neighborhood park? Is there value in duplicating amenities at each park, or do you focus some amenities at other parks and use a different set of amenities since it is relatively small community there's value. All of that is kind of open discussion as we get to that kind of brainstorming and what's possible and what's the best. And you're right, just using it as is and having a season or two. I'm not sure, or two, they may not, the residents may not like the or two part, but yeah, trying it out and seeing, and also having the development fully built out to see, is it a view shed, to have, some people want trees for shade. Some people, the trees will block beautiful sunset views. So, there's a lot to it. And I think the good part is getting the group together. It was great for us to get to know some of the people there, for them some of them are, most are new to Coburg. So to kind of give a little primer on budget and the master plan, there's Parks and Open Space master plan that guides the conversation as well. So lots more to come, but I thought it was really fun. I really liked that setup. It was very informal. We just said we're going to be there between 4 and 5, show up. And some people showed up and stayed for a few. Some people stayed the whole time. Some people talked, some people didn't, just listened. I think that's something that we talked as a staff just this afternoon about, what's the next kind of a project that makes sense to have another little pop-up like that. And it may be our Collector Street project in the spring when we get enough of the design started but not finalized, to just do another pop-up or two and just say, hey, we're going to be here, come talk to us. And of course, we never limit it. You can talk to us about anything. It's good to have a main topic, but then, anything else that everybody wants. So
Is this just held out in front of the park area?
we're just on the park. Yeah, we walked around. Brian put a pile of rocks together to get some, did some pre-hand grading already on his own while we were waiting. And then some of the kids played with those rocks. So to your point.
BMX track or something,
Right.
depending on the age group, because that's not something we have out here. It's
Yeah.
local kids.
Yeah, and that's really where that whole diversity of input is valuable. There's lots of things that people can say they want something, but we also need to identify what's the operations and maintenance, what are the downsides of noise in a tighter area versus a park next to a commercial area. Those have different impacts that aren't always obvious at the front. So yeah, I think it's going to be fun, but I think it's mixed with some probable frustration over the time that it takes. But we're trying to educate that's how it normally happens and how it especially has to happen when we have funding challenges. But we can still get a good project.
So I think it's good to, as we get closer to the planning process, since you've already had that initial touch point with those people, to make sure that they know that if they come to the parks meetings,
We told them that.
that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
We said there
That's
would be
important.
community output, and that it was, all members of the community would give input, just like we did with Johnny Diamond Park. That it isn't just their park, there is a certain feeling that they were promised a park. Well, that probably came from the developer. Would be my guess or it was a perception. And so we did our best to say, yes, that there is an open space is part of the zoning. There was also some concern, and I was glad that Megan was there to answer concerns about what was going to happen to the open field behind them. Was that going to be developed right away? And so Megan could speak to that, and that would be a much longer term process. There was some concern, folks there that have kids that, as Adam said, they're already playing in the park, there was some concern about maybe some construction debris still left in there. And so we'll be, having those conversations. I don't know how much there is, but again, that's perception. So, Counselor Bowman.
First of all, when did this take place? Secondly, next time we have one of these, please make sure you notify all of us.
Well, it was a small meeting purposefully where we had just Public Works, city administrator, planner, and myself. It was really just a listening, but next time we'll take that into account and certainly include more of council should you be willing and able to come. But you can't have a quorum.
No.
So, it was just sort of a quick meeting. We had some difficulty getting it scheduled there. We had hoped to do this earlier, actually, maybe in June, and then we're into October before we could actually get it going. It was, a week ago tomorrow?
Yep.
Yeah, that we finally were able to at least get the word out and get people there. And I think all of us were pretty surprised at how many people actually came. And the numbers initially when that project was being developed, the feedback that I had gotten was that there were very few children going to be in that area. And you're shaking your head, Megan. I was like, oh no, this is mostly retired people. And well, now there's 14 children in that area, in that neighborhood, and probably more to come. There are a lot of young families. So, and it's mixed. I mean, there's certainly retired people as I walk around there and talk to people, and there are people with young families and people, and right now, of course, if you ask, well, what do you want in a park? They're looking at a park for young kids, but in a few years, those will be teenage kids, it goes by pretty quickly. And so that's the challenge, if you will, of trying to really listen to everybody. And again, it's not a neighborhood park, it's a community park. And that was good to be able to say.
And I think, just to summarize all of that that's why we have a parks and open space master plan, to kind of have that big picture conversation about what is the system, designed to do, and how does that asset, the parks asset, be developed and maintained and expanded to benefit the entire community. And that'll be, part of it. And by virtue of development, we have some land in a spot that if we had it to our own choosing, we probably wouldn't be in that spot where we'd probably have something more on the south end. So that's part of a parks master plan as well. This one is tied to our development code, which requires deeding a certain amount, which we may want to revisit at some point too, to have a fee in lieu of, or of that option, because then we may not want to have continued undeveloped park assets with an expectation of additional improvement dollars in a location that may be somewhat redundant to already existing parks nearby. The kind of a common goal is a park within a quarter mile of all residential homes. I'm not sure I haven't done any analysis to see if we have that in total, but where we're probably short is on the south end. And so that's again, another master plan type conversation that shows why we have those and why it's important to keep touching back to that as we look at the amenities we want to put in.
Always much more complicated than it looks at the outset.
Just the fact that there is information given to them from a broad group and represents all the stakeholders in the community, basically. That's a start.
To start. And that's, that again, that speaks to the transparency that we really try and have as we are involved in city government or any government. But certainly we have the impact. We can control that in our city. Can't necessarily control it on a larger venue.
The remaining items there are more of our regular monthly statistics. I'm glad to answer any questions if you have any. But the next item that we can dive into in a little more depth is the Police Department quarterly report. That Larry will come up and hang out with me here and talk about.
Question before.
Okay.
Counselor Fox, sorry.
The alley, you have the location of all the citizen inquiries except for the obstructed alley. What alley was that? Or if you don't know. you don't know anything.
It is Delaney between Coleman and.
Oh.
Do you have it?
Coleman and Dixon.
Dixon.
I'm sorry. Delaney and Dixon.
Okay.
Did you throw rocks out there?
No. I'm gonna go look at it then.
I'm sorry, Pearl and Dixon.
Oh.
It would be on the Dixon Street side.
The alley. Okay.
And the other one is, and I only bring this up, because it rings a bell, is that, and I mentioned this back when I saw it back, I believe in June or July, the industrial noise. That's when I knocked on doors in 2020. I heard about the industrial noise, and public safety was there with microphones and things at all different hours. And finally, after 3 years, we fined them $500, and somehow that worked for a period of time, but did again.
Yeah, and we're into a little bit of that same mode. I got caught up on some of the history from Chief Larson, and we have had the noise meter out there. That's why it's, you can see it's June, and it's the oldest one that's still in there, as we've been doing some data collection at different times a day, really looking at some of the statistics, and then also conversations on the industrial, the managers, which as I've seen is typical. The players change on their side. Who's management or supervisory staff, compared to when we were working with them before. Was the change, the noise, an anomaly, or is it part of a regular operating procedure? And our data is helping us kind of figure that out. And then you have to, is it a reoccurring, or is it a once every while, once a day, twice? If there's patterns, we can typically, somebody's on the industrial side, my experience has been they're willing to mitigate that if we can help them figure out what it is that's causing it. And usually if it's more rhythmic, obviously mechanical equipment, that's something that can be repaired. If it's kind of human based and it ends up happening, and then it'll stop for a while, and then maybe somebody forgets, or they roll the door up and 6 a.m. On an early morning, make a bunch of noise. So we don't always get a good picture with the data, but I think we've got a good pattern going.
We do. So we've ran a couple weeks worth of statistics, and really there is no pattern. We did have one day that had a spike that was pretty loud. So I went and talked to management. It was an annual audit they did of metal. So they were moving forklifts and moving equipment around.
Inventory style.
Inventory, an annual inventory. So that was the only real violation we found. And it was really short in duration.
Where is the noise originating from?
This particular noise was from Carry On Trailers,
Okay,
which is a trailer manufacturing company.
Lots of metal and lots of.
Lots of
climbing.
metal, forklifts. And in the past, we found there was one of the companies had a big squirrel fan about yay big that was making noise as bearing was going out. So we got that fixed. Another company had a tumbler where they had slag on some metal material. It was basically a big washing machine, that's my understanding. And then we had them quit doing that during times of the day. It's an industrial complex.
My memory from the past was new manager, and there would be shifts. They started shifts
Yeah.
earlier.
Correct.
Yeah.
That was it too, especially in the middle of summer. A couple of years ago, we had where they were starting earlier because of the heat, which I think there was some kind of an OSHA exemption for when he got to a certain temperature, but that was a couple of years ago.
I have seen many cities, I've seen several so far this year, kind of memorialize some of that OSHA temporary stuff into their noise ordinance. And actually, because a lot of cities will have can't start before 7 a.m. And because of some of that OSHA stuff, they're amending their noise ordinance. And it's kind of going against what some of the nearby residents would like to see, but it is kind of a workplace requirement. If the state's mandating it, kind of local codes sometimes need to be amended to adjust for that. So that's an interesting piece of our changing world.
Not, I think Chief Larson, we're on to you.
Numbers. So it's the quarterly report for the second quarter, which ended June 30th. I'm gonna try to remember way back what we did, but we divided trying to capture all that the police department does. So we divided our activities into 7 different categories. Real quick, it's the same as before, but traffic stop, person stops, category 1, business check, patrol checks, person crimes, which it lists all of the different, like assault, rape, sex abuse, runaway, suicidal, those type of crimes, property crimes, kind of society crimes is number 5, warrant arrest, and then everything else. So you can see we did 192 traffic stops, 49 business checks. It breaks it down. 34 person crimes, which is everything from an assault, harassment to a rape case. Under the person crimes, property crimes is a theft, a burglary, criminal mischief, anything done to a love flinching to a motor vehicle, somebody's stealing somebody's wallet or, change in the car. Call for society is a DUI, animal calls, ordinance calls, anything that really affects the general public. It's not a specific victim, or there doesn't have to be a specific victim. And then warrant arrests are warrants from our agency or other police departments that have a warrant in the system. And then all other crimes for service, which could be an assist with Oregon State Police, fire department, the whole list of all that activity. And then I'll be glad to answer any questions.
On the patrol business checks, are those just routine checks or?
More or less, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, trying to, because if we drive around for 5 hours, you don't think we're doing anything, but we'll call out a patrol check at the Oracle gas station or the truck stop. And what that does is it also gives a time stamp that we drove by that area. So if we have a theft, it might narrow the time frame.
Okay.
So we can maybe see if we talk to somebody an hour prior in a certain vehicle, we might be able to develop a suspect or something. That's kind of why you do the patrol checks. And just document that we're out there patrolling.
Mr. Lyman.
It's just out of curiosity, of the 192 traffic stops, do you have a percentage of how many of those result in tickets?
We're close to about 40%. So the officers have discretion, and if we like to write not 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, but at least a 10 mile an hour amount. So that kind of a rough guess, about 40% would be a citation.
A lot of just warnings. And
Right. Yeah, a lot of it's about education. Like when we do the traffic sting or we sit there and watch the crosswalk, most of that is going to be education. If there's pretty egregious, it's going to be a ticket, right? As a reminder to stop the crosswalk.
Do you find that most of the traffic stops are non-residents as opposed to people?
It depends on the location. A lot of the ones that run stop signs are residents because they get too familiar and they just cruise through the stop sign without stopping. Find that true here and in Harrisburg. So it depends on the location. For speeders, a lot of it's out of area of people traveling through town.
Not related to your report, but we had conversation over the last year or so of looking into the use of drones to help you in your.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of case law and stuff regarding drones. I just don't know if we're capable to do that. I talked to a lieutenant at Eugene Police Department in charge of the drones, and there's quite a bit of law with that. And so I got to balance the cost versus our need. if we need one, the county has a drone team. They got a couple people. And I know EPD has multiple drones of varying sizes and for different applications. And I'm sure Springfield does too, but yeah, it's a great tool because, I mean, we've actually had a drone north of town. Officer Wilson got in looking for a domestic violence suspect, ended up being a standoff in Lynn County, just over the line. They used a drone on that particular call. Last summer, I think it was, we had a guy that ran from us a couple times in the county church farm. We had a drone out off the bottom loop. They ended up being assaulted out there. So they're a great tool, cover much more ground than we can.
But they are not inexpensive.
No, they're
And you
not.
have to have
Right.
somebody that knows how to use them
Right.
too. So-
Yeah, you have to have a UEV, I can't remember the acronym, UAV. You have to have a UAV license and it requires, there's certain requirements. It's doable, but as Chief's mentioning, you really have to have enough programmatic needs to make it really worth your while. You know, if you know, we've talked about it as a staff, there may be a combination between some things that are valuable for us and may become regulatory on the public works side, where we can share that resource across the departments. There's some vegetation management things. There's some of the stormwater wetland things we were just talking about today that we probably don't rise by themselves to us getting into that directly. We would contract that or do something. But if you couple enough of it together, there may be at some point in the future, it might make sense to do that, but it's a little more significant. And of course, we need policy. There's a lot from our insurance. There's risk and liability. There's a lot of different things that we would need to cover, but it is a good tool.
Yeah, and I asked the lieutenant about, you know, like I was thinking the antique fair, be nice to fly one around, you know, kind of preventative. You can't do that. I didn't know. You have to do it as responding to a crime. And so there's some case law and things that we would have to work out. Again, I think it's a great tool, but I think we have the assets available through Lane County Sheriff's Department, who dispatches for us. So they, you know, if we need one, I know I can get one.
Thank you. Dr. Bowman?
I have two quick comments. First of all, I want to take this opportunity to compliment your officers for their professionalism. A few weeks ago, I was out on my walk in the evening and I had an opportunity to discreetly observe a traffic stop. And I can't remember who performed the stop, but he was very professional, especially considering that this woman, whoever she was but mightily displeased and not shy about expressing that. So I want to thank the department for their professionalism. Secondly, I would simply like to make or put it on the record that I have noticed an increase in activity relating to unhoused persons, particularly in the park and around the restrooms and that sort of thing. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it is something I have noticed, and someone told me they actually found a hypodermic needle in the Norma Piper Park recently. So it is activity that I think is on the rise, and that you may be seeing more of if you're not already.
I don't think it's an increase. I think we've always had it. And then the problem with not the problem, but with the public park, anybody can use it. So of course, we find them with, you know, there for a while, drugs were not illegal. They are now, I think starting in October, actually, I think with the deflection program. So we try to address the homeless with whatever their needs are as soon as we can, which is the use of the CHEP program. You know, to help them with gas, or if they need a bus ticket, or a lot of times they're traveling through Coburg. So that's a good tool. I thought it was going to compliment us on our scarecrow, but I love the dog.
The scarecrow is probably one of the more inventive ones I've seen. And again, I'm aware of the work that you do to combat that. I just wanna, simply put it on the record that it is on citizens' radars now, I think more than it has been in the past. And people are coming to me out of a mix of proactivity and concern. And I've noticed it myself, just walking through the park. And so I know you're probably aware of it. I just wanted to put it on the record, but thank you for the work that you do, which is generally always impeccable and professional. And
Thank you.
Yeah. So with that being said, in my monthly report, one of the two of the calls I think that we had was an attempted burglary, or at least minimum of trespass. It was a mom with a couple of teenage girls, which led us into a conversation about burglaries and home security. So developing a new program, we're gonna offer a personal home security check for people's residents, so that residents can call, make an appointment with the police officer. We'll come out to your house. We have, I think it's about 40 questions, go over landscaping, lighting, exterior doors, just general security stuff to get the view to kind of be proactive and also educate the residents that there are crimes that occur in Coburg and to help us to maybe combat that. So sometimes I love motion lights because I've chased people before. So was Donnie, we were chasing them by barking dogs, or you're chasing them by motion lights coming on and off. So that normally startles a burglar and it'll scare them away. So there's little things that make the big difference from law enforcement perspective. So we're gonna offer that service, probably pretty close to getting the program off the ground, but hopefully next month. And we'll put it out on social media and the police department website. They can call, make an appointment, and we'll just talk to them about home security at their property.
Fantastic. I'm sure that will be very well received.
Yeah, I have two people that want to be guinea pigs already. I'm excited.
I think that's great. And I think you're absolutely right. I think many of us that live in Coburg still think we're back in 1940s and there is no crime and things are just all fine. And the reality is we aren't.
I agree with you. We had a call where some people went out to dinner in Eugene, came back home. They knew they had a burglar because their house was locked.
Oh my.
Because they never locked their house. And so we found a female high on methamphetamine inside of their house. So that's Coburg.
Oh,
That's great. That's great.
wow.
It would also
Can't wait
just
to
make-
tell my wife.
It might also be nice to put a checklist as you go forward with this
I have one.
in the Countryman,
Oh,
since that's.
Good point.
thank you.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we'll use all those channels.
That'll be a great
piece-
resource.
Mhm.
I think that'll be very, very well received. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? We've hit all of the high points. Are there any council comments? Anything that's burning away or any liaison assignments that you
I have a liaison report from Parks. Administrator Hanks was at our last meeting and you can fill in if I misinterpreted this, but he discussed maintenance plans week to week as well as major maintenance plans that would then help, for like they did at Johnny Diamond. That maybe every a park would get a major maintenance every 3 years. And then Mr. Beatty also suggested, to do the weed abatement at an opportune time, so it's more effective before everything blooms. And that this would also just help with also budget and time going forward. Give us a good idea of what's needed. Also encouraged the committee and the community to bring up issues that they see in the parks as far as maintenance or anything dangerous, because that helps to create a feedback loop, so it's easier to pay attention to it and get it resolved. And I think that was a big part of the meeting. That was a lot of it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about some of the volunteer work as well, and trying to make sure that we're as smooth and accommodating as we can, while also making sure we get our appropriate liability and all those other things covered, and balancing that out, and trying to help the committee with what we don't want to do is turn off or turn away some people that are interested. And Counselor, one item from the pop-up meeting we had is we did both the mayor and I did make a pitch. Somebody brought up, why don't we have volunteers? And we said, we do. They would love for you to come. So maybe we'll get some volunteers out of that little meeting from Coburg Creek. But that was another topic. And I think there's still more to come on making that as smooth and as streamlined as we can, and understanding there are some parameters about what's appropriate volunteering and what is kind of where that line is, where it's more of a project and it's not necessarily, best practice or appropriate for a volunteer to do. And how do we as staff kind of help the committee understand that, and not have to kind of run run enforcement on that, and divert that over to us. Let us try and handle that without scaring people away. We want as many volunteer resources as we can. So still more that we'll massage on that one.
At the next work party is October 23rd at 9 o'clock at the Pavilion.
How is that advertised? How is that put out?
It's on the Facebook page.
Yep.
We have talked in the past, and at some point there was going to be a sandwich sign in front of the park for like the week before. There was going to be a cleanup, but that hasn't happened.
Councilor Lyman.
Yeah, as a liaison to the planning commission, we had a meeting this last month, and it was approved for the Coburg Community School to have a non-conforming sign replace the previous sign that was in disrepair. So that was unanimously approved. But one question did come up: does the council have any jurisdiction or authority over content of signs? I know we do with murals. Megan was there, but she wasn't quite sure that we do either for public or private signs in the city limits.
No. That's very clear Supreme Court ruling that government entities, local jurisdictions primarily, can regulate time, place, and manner, cannot regulate content. Many codes have some remnants that you would look at, and how can you enforce certain sections without knowing the content, when there's a example of a temporary sign that's allowed, political sign. Well, that actually is, not consistent with the Supreme Court rulings, because in order to regulate, you have to read the content to know whether it's political or not. So updated ordinances for that topic list dates by which a certain size sign can go up, which in effect is political, the allowance of political signs. So 30 days before an election and 7 days after, or 45 before. Different cities will do that. Just an example of how you have to manage your sign code to ensure that you are not accidentally, either purposefully or accidentally, regulating signs based on content. And murals that happened when my very first meeting here. I've got fair amount of experience in another community with public art and murals. And in that community, it was completely removed from the land use code and the development code because of that. So it was an exemption in the land use code to say public art as defined in another ordinance and reference there followed a certain set of rules, and it's specifically not in a land use development code because of the inability of local governments to regulate content. You can do it in other means on public when it's public art. And that's an interesting piece of ours is the mural policy has public and private. We probably need to put it on at least the side list to revisit that and clarify that.
Maribel, one administrative question. Were we supposed to approve the minutes today?
It was in the consent agenda.
Oh,
It should be okay with that.
just making sure,
Thank you.
because I do actually read those.
Yes, it's very important and we appreciate that. Anybody else? Updates, any burning questions? Okay, if not, there's a list of upcoming agenda items for your review. Those will come again in November. We'll have those upcoming agenda items, at least those three. And then future meetings, we probably need to talk about the revenue subcommittee first meeting, but I'll do that afterwards. And then the Park and Tree meeting is on October 15th. Finance Audit Committee is October 22nd. And then we'll have another Revenue Subcommittee meeting and later in October. Election Day is coming on November 5th. I believe you still have a couple more days. If you're not registered to vote, get registered. I assume that everybody here is. And right on that, November 11th is Veterans Day and City Hall will be closed. And November 12th, we'll have City Council again. Gosh. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I will adjourn the meeting at 7:31.